Barbecue. Welcome, everybody, to yet another Boost, Booze, and Barbecue. This is Andy. That's Jojo. And we are bringing a brand new show to you guys from a very special place. We are in the tasting room of Spiritopia in Corvallis, Oregon. And we are sitting down to talk to Chris from Spiritopia. Chris, how are you, my friend?
Doing great, thanks.
And Jojo, how are we doing?
I'm doing great.
That's fantastic. So glad to see you guys. Chris, thanks so much for letting us do this here. We really appreciate it. And we just shot a Thirsty Thursday video, and you made the most incredible drink for us. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Always happy to talk more about the booze. I've always been a fan of Manhattans, and of course, their core ingredient there is either a bourbon or a rye whiskey. And we have a product at Spiritopia that we call bourbon style brandy, which we can talk more about later. But long story short, it has a very whiskey-like profile, and so I started fiddling one evening with that, and the other core ingredient of a Manhattan is, of course, a sweet vermouth, and so did that, and then instead of bitters, because I have a bit of a sweet tooth, as you'll see from our product lineup, I used a bittersweet liqueur called a Benedictine from France, and came up with this drink, and in honor of its French heritage, or at least part of it, I called it the Chevalier, the knight in shining armor, if you will. And it's lovely. It really is, great relaxer when you get home from work, let me tell you.
Oh, it's so good. And I'm not even a Manhattan fan, but when I had it the first time,
I am a Manhattan
Joe
fan,
is,
and I love it.
And so is my wife, and she was just here a second ago, and I think that most likely when I get home, I'm going to see all of these components on the counter, and she will have had a few of them, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
It's best to keep it to a few or less, because they are relatively potent.
Yeah, it'll sneak up on you for sure.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly. That's awesome. Well, we have got quite a lineup that you have, and I love all of your boozes. It's not very often that I say that. You know, Joe knows typically when we're talking about a specific place, I got to be a little careful because not everything they make is something that I like, you know, and that's just the way it goes. That's the nature of the beast. You're never going to love everything. You can't love everything on the menu of McDonald's, even if you eat there every single day. But I'll tell you, a couple of my favorites are your ginger liqueur and your peppermint. But what I really want to know about the peppermint is how you make it taste so much like peppermint, but it doesn't have that what am I looking for? The peppermint schnapps. Yeah, exactly. That very artificial peppermint flavor. You know, it's not exactly a schnapps, right?
It's as far as definition, you know, if you get me started about TTB rules, we will be here all night.
Boy.
But you can interchange a liqueur and a schnapps are pretty synonymous in most things.
Okay.
Schnapps is used more in Europe as a designation. It is not an official category in the United States.
Okay.
And so a lot of our products are liqueurs, but would qualify as a schnapps. The things that are really different about our peppermint, and I appreciate your noticing, there's really just two things. It's actually, of all the things I make, it is one of, if not the simplest. But the brilliance of the simplicity there is two things. One, we live in the peppermint capital.
Yes, we do.
Oregon is the #1 peppermint producer in the United States.
It's
We
funny
even
you
have
say
festivals
that.
for it.
That's right, and it's funny you say that.
I need to get there.
You do.
with some of that peppermint.
Oh, yeah.
liqueur.
Yeah, it's Amsville, isn't it? Or Staten Mint Festival every year? I can't remember.
We'll have to look that up. We'll link it on the website.
Yeah.
But we were driving through some mint fields, my wife and I, the other day. And as a kid, we would pull over and pick some mint to have along the drive. And man, it really took me back to my childhood because we were driving past it and we had the windows down and it smelled amazing. And I said to the wife, oh, we're totally going to pull over and grab some of this. So and that's what appeals to me so much with your peppermint liqueur. Sorry to sidetrack what you were saying, but it's just it's a visceral thing for me because I'm smelling your peppermint liqueur and it's taking me back to those moments of having those road trips down the back roads of Oregon and getting out and picking some fresh mint off of the side of the road. And it's a very nostalgic drink for me.
Yeah. The locale here, is huge for the mint. I mean, literally that mint is grown on Kiger Island island just a few miles south of Corvallis. I go down to the farm to get the mint.
Wow.
And it's one of our little tagline things is real ingredients, real craft, real intense. And that's a perfect example. We go and we get the best of breed, which in this case has to be next door, which is awesome.
That's great.
And it's the complexity of that mint oil that gives it a fuller flavor. Imitation mint, which is basically just menthol, can be produced for almost nothing.
Wow.
And so, that's the temptation, and that's what a lot of people use. And it tastes minty, but it lacks that depth. It lacks the aroma, a lot of things. So one of the differences is using real Oregon mint oil, and that's super cool. The other is also, not a huge secret, and it kind of goes across our product line, which is I tend to use less sugar. Sugar's cheap and overused.
Wow,
it is it is actually the defining ingredient of liqueurs as opposed to the alcohol content, which is odd, but that's the one category that's like that. And while there needs to be some in there, most people just use too much. And so it ends up syrupy and sticky and, it can be bad news. And so those are the two areas where we're different than most other peppermint products, and ends up been, something that's been pretty well received. We're excited about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Kind of brings a whole new spin to the farm to table trend that we're seeing lately.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, because it's something that's very, very locally done and done in a very professional way. I'm honestly kind of amazed at your price point on it now that I learned that you're sourcing very local ingredients. The 325 milliliter is only $20.
Yeah.
It's surprising that you're able to make such a high quality craft product for such a competitive price.
Well, really appreciate that. Most of the other peppermint products are cheaper, and cheaper ingredients and so on. So they can do that. And we, really wanted to try to make the best things that we can, try to be best of breed at whatever we're doing. And, so that costs more, at the end of the day.
Yep.
That and being small is more expensive. It's just your labor content, your equipment is smaller, all of those things. And that's part of, I'm extremely appreciative of how much Oregonians embrace, craft in general, whether it's building bicycles or wine and spirits, across the board. They really want the local people that are doing a good job and keeping the economy locally strong and all that kind of stuff. It's very, very much appreciated and very reassuring, because it's essential for us. We're not going to be able to compete with, somebody that's producing it by the metric ton. And we hope ours is better as well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it absolutely is.
It's absolutely better. And it's sort of the Anheuser-Busch syndrome. They're so big that if they have a bad batch of beer, it can go down the drain, and it really doesn't affect them that much. I mean, people are always going to say, of course it affects them because it's thousands of gallons of beer. However, you get someone very local to us, a very small place, if they have to dump out an entire batch of beer, they're probably putting their payroll on a credit card after that. It's just, it's very difficult to recover when you're small and you're doing very craft things. And so there's a level of confidence and dedication that has to come with that really is showing through in your product. So it's very impressive. And that you had mentioned your your bourbon style apple brandy, and I had never had anything like that until we moved down here. I honestly had never had anything like it before, and the first time I tasted it, I just thought, this is sort of like Applejack, except for 1,000 times better. What is your process for producing that, and how do you age it?
Well, so it's interesting that you bring up Applejack. So a little side story on that, because a lot of people have heard that word. And again, in the the lexicon of the TTB, the Trade and Taxation Bureau, the people that manage alcohol in the United States, Applejack and apple brandy are technically synonyms. So we could, in fact, call that Applejack if we want to.
Oh, okay.
We don't. And there's a very good reason not to. And that is because the historic way that Applejack was made was not with distillation. It was with what was called jacking. And jacking is when you take the cider, and this is like when mostly people lived in the 13 colonies on the East Coast, particularly in New England. They would leave a barrel of cider out for the winter, and the water in it freezes, but the alcohol doesn't.
Right.
And so they would drain the liquid out of the barrel, leave the ice behind, and go from something that's, 6% alcohol to higher and higher and higher until they had something that was the strength of a strong spirit. And that process is called jacking. And the problem with that process is that it not only concentrates the alcohol, it concentrates all the icky things that give you a hangover.
Exactly.
And, I won't bore you with all the sciencey names, but bad juju.
Yeah.
So very different than the process we use, which is thermal distillation, where you take the cider and you put it in the still, you heat it up, and things evaporate out the top. And the things that are really bad for you all boil at a very low temperature, and they come off the still first, and we reject those. We literally downgrade them into cleaner. We clean parts with them. We clean counters with them.
Oh my gosh.
They're basically solvents.
What are a few of the chemical compounds?
Acetone, acetaldehyde, ethyl acetate, and methanol. And particularly in fruits like apple, really any fruit that has pectin. So apples, pears, plums, cherries, there's a few others. All of them have pectin, things that you make jam out of,
Right.
And when pectin comes apart chemically, you get something called methanol. Well, methanol is very, very toxic.
Yeah.
It takes something like 50 milliliters to kill you.
Wow.
And, it doesn't take very much in the spirit to make you sick. And so it's really important that you do a good job distilling and separate that out. And in small quantities, it gives you a hangover. And after that, the symptoms just get worse and worse. So that's why you want distilled brandy and not jacked brandy.
Right.
So luckily,
Good to know.
real Applejack is mostly an artifact of the past.
I got to be honest, you have used some very big words that make me feel like you've got a little bit more background than just in distillation.
Yeah, well, I'm sort of the Breaking Bad of the distilling world.
That's awesome.
When I told my roommate from college that I had started a distillery, he just burst out laughing. And I couldn't stop him for like 30 seconds, And I'm like, what? It's an okay thing to do.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, you're the Breaking Bad,
Oh my gosh.
And so it's kind of true because I'm a chemist by training and I also have an engineering degree. And, when I first started, I didn't start brewing beer or making wine or making spirits. I started making biofuels. And so I started the distillery 5 years ago. 12 years ago, I left my job in high tech and started a research company in bioethanol. And we were making fuel grade ethanol out of the local straws. One of the things that we are also the capital of the world is ryegrass. Right. And all of you that are out there sneezing and itching your eyes right now, you know about ryegrass. One of the biggest pollen producers anywhere. Anyway, so that's a huge crop here, mostly for seed and forage. And we were trying to utilize the straw, because for those of you that have lived in Oregon a long time, they used to burn the straw, and then people got bummed out with the smoke and the air pollution with that. And so they have tried to find uses for the straw, and it's difficult. It's a fairly low value commodity.
It doesn't have much in the way of carbohydrates in it, right?
Well, it has what you call structural carbohydrates, and that's cellulose. And now again, you're going to need to reel me in if I get like too far off in the weeds here, but literally. But basically, straw is it's about 70% carbohydrates, but they're not ones we know how to use. They're not like sugar.
Right.
They are structural, meaning it's the stuff that holds the plant together. And so our work was around enzymes that would break down the straw into sugars that yeast could ferment.
I remember reading about this research.
It's called cellulosic ethanol.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's what we were doing. And we did some awesome work. It was super, super fun. We did work for the National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, and we were extracting an enzyme from this bacterium that lives in the ocean and modifying it so it would do a better job on straw. And it was great. And it was work that we need to do.
Right.
We need to, slowly but surely work our way off of fossil fuels and onto more renewable fuels. We all know it, and we all don't want to pay for it and all those things, but time will come. But this wave of it was not the full fruition. So, our little company was called Trillium Fiber Fuels, and there were many other little startups like it. We're all pushing that wave forward. And, it made a lot of progress, and it went from laboratory curiosity to being more of a slightly higher priced alternative. But in, the capitalistic world, higher priced alternative still sits on the shelf.
Right.
So that's where it was. And then the Saudis started to get nervous about price of oil and pushed the supply and drove the price of a barrel down to $40 a gallon, or $40 a barrel, excuse me. And the whole fracking phenomenon took place. And between those two, it really suppressed oil prices. And when that happened, all things biofuels died. And our funding sources dried up. We were primarily a grant-driven organization.
Right.
So that went away. I had to close down the company and, basically laid off all but one person. And said, well, what am I going to do now?
Right.
And
I mean, at that point, did you even have much of a nest egg that was built up, or
not from that company? I had a nest egg built up from my work in high tech. And Trillium did reasonably well. It was sustaining itself, but not really putting anything away.
Right. But you had enough to where you were able to make this transition into a small distillery.
Well, I was by my wife's good graces. Essentially, the two of us have funded the distillery for, its entirety to date. So we're 5 years into it, and we have quite a lot of money into it, and still hoping there's, I won't say a pot of gold at the end of it, but at least,
if there was
some
a
return.
If there was a green colored light at the end of the tunnel, you'd be happy.
Yeah, I'd be good with that. Yeah. So another part of the segue that's sort of fun is that, we learned a lot about ryegrass along the way and wheat. And one of the things that's interesting is you said, well, there's not much sugar in it, but when it's growing and it's at the stage, we're a little past it right now. So in April and early May, when the grass is 1 foot to 1.5 foot tall, and it's still all just blades and it doesn't have its seed heads yet, and it's growing like crazy, it actually uses sugars to drive that growth and build the seed head. So that if you cut grass at that level, there is some soluble sugars in there. Have you ever noticed how dogs love eating grass in the springtime?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's because they can taste it.
Interesting.
Now, if we try to taste it, we're so desensitized to sugar that it seems pretty minimal.
Right.
And the plant also picks up other salts that make it more bitter for us. But long story short, there is sugar there. So like all good scientists, we made shine out of the ryegrass.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so we took a bunch of ryegrass and put it through our screw press, which is this massive squeezer. And made this god-awful looking green juice. It looked like if you've ever had a wheatgrass shot,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
it's like that.
Okay.
You can't really be a natural born Oregonian until you've had a wheat shot, I don't think.
I would agree with that.
So I hadn't had one. So I was raised in Michigan, so I didn't know about these things.
Oh.
And when we were doing this, I said, this looks like that nasty wheatgrass stuff that people drink. So I went to Jamba Juice. Can I say Jamba Juice on the air? I guess so, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll beep it out if we have to.
Yeah. I don't think they'll mind.
I went there and I said, I want to try a wheatgrass shot. And she said, what do you want to chase it with? I mean, right off the bat, that was the first thing she said. I was like, nothing. She's like, dude.
Hardcore.
Yeah. Because I wanted to know, because I knew what mine tasted like, and I'm like, this is bad, you know?
Right.
Yeah. And I took the wheatgrass shot, I'm like, ooh, yes, also bad.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, okay, it's no worse than that, but who wants to drink that? So,
Right.
so yeah, we did some cool stuff. We basically pasteurized it and did some separations and things, and fermented it into beer. The beer sucked too. So it's like, okay, we got one process step left, so let's distill it. And so we did that. And then we were like, dang,
Okay.
this is interesting. So it's really interesting. It's, I don't know if you guys are into all different world spirits, but there is this stuff in Brazil called cachaça. It is, do you know in Brazil they have a national drink? A
No.
national drink. What kind of country? How cool is that, right?
I'm moving to
The
Brazil.
caipirinha. The caipirinha
Caparenha.
is the national drink of Brazil. The number 2 spirit in the world by volume is cachaça. You know what number 1 is, by the way? Shoju in China.
Oh. Our photographer just had a big reaction. Come
Yes.
over here, AJ. What's the story? Come over here.
I mispronounced it.
Shoju? I think it might be Korean, South Korean.
You're right. So there's different things that are very similar. So the Vietnamese version is called baijiu, and there's a Japanese version and a Korean version and a Chinese version. So help me out.
I just know soju because I'm Korean. That's about it.
Shoju is Korean. I think shoju is the pronunciation for the one that's produced in Korea and China. Possibly.
I just turned 21. I don't know. I just heard soju. And I was like,
So that we get the pronunciation right, go ahead and say it into the mic.
think, don't quote me, soju. Or shoju.
Yeah.
You have disappointed your family.
Oh. It's okay. He's Korean, not Chinese.
Oh, man. Okay, yeah, you're right.
And the only reason I know about the Vietnamese one, quick plug here, we have a very cool distillery here in Oregon, Vin Distillery up in Portland.
Yeah.
Transplanted Vietnamese family, awesome people, awesome spirits. And I actually have one behind the bar if you want to try it. So
Nice.
anyway, that's number 1. Number 2 is cachaça. And cachaça is made from cane. It's Brazil, right? They grow lots and lots of sugar cane. And unlike rum that everybody in America is familiar with,
Right.
which is made primarily from the molasses, which is a byproduct of sugar processing, cachaça is made from fresh squeezed cane juice.
Wow.
And so it's more earthy. It's more grassy. Cane is a grass, right? And so when we made this stuff out of ryegrass, it was kind of like that. It's a little
Okay.
earthy, not quite what you'd call smoky. I know you guys are into smoke.
Yeah.
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 So this is an interesting thing. So we decided, all right. So then we came up with a plan. And the plan was we're going to make liqueurs in the short term because I love sweet things.
Yeah.
And we're going to make ryegrass whiskey in the long term.
Okay.
And so that was that. You now know the entire business plan.
Fantastic.
That was it.
And so just as a little bit of a recap clarification, this is not a rye whiskey. This is a rye grass whiskey.
Right.
This is the actual shoots of grass. It's not the seed.
Good distinction.
Yes.
So, okay, I'm going to nerd out on you for just a second here and I'll come back.
Okay.
So the plants we're talking about here, rye is called Sakali, is its scientific name.
Okay.
Wheat is called Triticum and ryegrass is called lolium. So when we made our company that was about the straws from wheat and ryegrass, we took tritium and lolium and made trillium. And that's why the company was called Trillium Fiber Fuels. Of course, then we used the Trillium flour, which people are familiar with, but it had this little nerdy sciencey thing going on in the background. Cool. And so anyway, moving on.
That's fun. I love
That's awesome. Yeah.
So we, started the process. The whole licensing thing with TTB is a quagmire and is forever pretty much. It's just how it works, or doesn't. And started with our ginger liqueur. That was our very first product. Still our most popular product.
How could it not be? It's so good.
I feel a little bit like that baseball player that, gets up, first bat, hits it over the fence, and then people are like, wow, this is going to be great, and then proceeds to hit bunts and singles for the rest of his career.
You got to start with that C+. That's what's important. Not you, AJ. That doesn't work for you.
You got to handicap it.
Yeah. You got to start with that low expectation.
Nope.
And then anything you do that's a B or above, people are just like, hey, congratulations, fantastic.
Yeah. Where were you 6 years ago? So.
Hey, I was around. Okay. I was around. We're gonna go back in time, and I'm gonna become your hype man.
There you go. So, we put the ginger liqueur. I did between 75 and 100 different batches just to tune the process and get it exactly how I wanted it. We finally submit the formula. Goes through on the first try.
Nice.
Put the label together. Did all the stuff, and it's all coming along sweet. And then we submitted the formula for the ryegrass whiskey. And I'm thinking about it, and I was concerned that they would say, well, it's not whiskey because you're not using the grain.
Oh.
You're using the plant.
Oh.
And so this gets back to, like rye whiskey. You're using the seeds, you're using the grain. You take that starch, you turn it into sugars, you ferment it, and off you go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I submit the formula for the ryegrass whiskey, the first version of the formula. And at that time, there was a very long queue. It took 3 months for them to get back to me. And I get one line of cryptic feedback. It says, please submit FDA evidence that ryegrass is allowed in a human food.
What?
Yeah, I said that in a couple more words. What the? And I'm like, what are they talking about?
Right.
And so to condense some painful meetings a little bit, I met with people from the FDA, and they said, you're right. It's innovative. It's new. No one's ever done it before.
No way.
And you need to do a toxicology study.
Oh, no.
Yeah, kiss of death.
Oh,
and
no.
So I'm like, ouch. I don't have the money. I don't have the time.
Yeah.
And went around and around, and I'm like, really? I can eat the cows that eat the grass, and I can eat the sheep that eat the grass, but I can't eat the grass. And they're like, sorry.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
So that got put on the back burner for a while. We continued to develop Spiritopia's liqueur portfolio. After the ginger came the apple, was our second product. All Northwest apples. It's hard cider, apple brandy, and sweetened with apple juice. Very fun. Third product was the pomegranate. We get this incredible pomegranate juice.
I actually have a bottle of that in my cupboard at home. My mom bought it at a booth you guys had in Dallas last summer. I want to say. Was it the eclipse? Okay. She couldn't remember when it was. She thought maybe the eclipse.
Yep.
But yeah, it's almost gone. We're hanging on to the last bit of it. So I might have to get a bottle before I go.
We can fix that problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and you know what we did with it the other day when I was over at your
Yeah.
house? We made a sake tini with it.
Yeah.
We mixed just a really nice clear sake
Yeah.
with that pomegranate, and I'm trying to remember, like a little squeeze of lemon or lime or something, just to give it a little bit of an.
You owe me one of those.
Yeah.
Oh yes, oh yes. We're
yes.
gonna bring the ingredients over here one of these days and make
Yeah.
it for you. It was fantastic.
It was really good.
It was very, very good. I was
Yeah.
very surprised at how good it was. But starting with that base of the Spiritopia pomegranate, and it's so much pomegranate. Granada.
Yep. Yeah. I'll trade you one of those. What did you call it? You have a name? See, come on, you got something catchy here.
Might need to be, I don't know, sake pomtini or
Ooh, sake pomtini. I like that.
sake
Sake
tumi. There we go.
Yeah. Sake tumi.
It will forever be known as pomegranate sake tumi.
There you go.
There you go.
I like it.
Perfect. Well, I'll trade you one for the Jacqueline Rose, which is the pomegranate, the apple brandy, and lime, which is super good and is sort of an updating on the 1920s cocktail called the Jack Rose, which was Applejack, which
Yeah.
we've already talked about a little bit.
Yeah.
And at the time, grenadine, la grenade, was made with real pomegranates instead
Right.
of red dye number 40
Right.
and corn syrup. And so we put back the real pomegranate in the Jack
that's
Rose,
cool.
and then just a little bit of lime juice and twist of the peel. It's super good.
Where's the Jacqueline part come from?
The Jacqueline part comes from a bow to our artist who did both the watercolor that you see on the pomegranate label and the one on the apple label. I knew exactly what I wanted for the apple label. Those brilliant spring blossoms when they're, just popping out.
Yeah.
A little
absolutely.
bit pink like that. And I looked through literally hundreds and hundreds of images online. Finally went, there it is. There it is.
Wow.
And I tracked her down. She lives in Indiana.
Oh.
And I called her up and said, hey, you want to write me a license so I can use this on my label? And she was excited. And
That's awesome.
we had fun working together. And so when it was time to do the pomegranate, I couldn't find one I liked. And so with that is actually commissioned artwork
That's really cool.
to do that label as well.
That's really
Yeah.
cool. Wow.
Yeah, I really love working on the labels.
Yeah.
It's definitely an obsessive behavior that
Yeah.
everyone enjoys making fun of me for.
Well, they're quite beautiful. Actually, they're
Thank
very
you.
artistic.
Yeah.
I feel like earlier when we were
Tell my
talking about your she can listen to the show.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Earlier when we were talking about the price point and you mentioned, you are priced higher than what we would consider the cheaper stuff, but you're getting not just what you pay for, you're getting so much more than what you're paying for here. I feel like if you want something that's going to just impress the socks off of people, and then you can kind of chuckle to yourself under your breath because you really didn't pay much for it. This is it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. This is it.
Yeah.
And, speaking of how high quality this stuff is, you've got two different apples up there. And I'm a little curious. I've tasted them both, and I can taste what the difference is, but I'm a little curious what the difference actually is in the bottle.
So you mean the two apple brandies?
Uh-huh,
Yes.
yeah.
So we do. We first came out with what we call our bourbon style brandy, and it's sort of serendipity. Part of it is that I like whiskey, so I like that taste profile, and that was part of it. When we did the ryegrass thing, we said, okay, we're going to make ryegrass whiskey, and as is not so uncommon, I got a little ahead of myself and started buying barrels. And then TTB said, whoa,
Yeah.
no, you're not doing that. And so that got back burnered. So when we started making brandy, I already had whiskey barrels. Well,
Oh, perfect.
I'm going to use them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right? So we'll see what that's going to come out like, right? And when I told, I actually do brandy distilling for winemakers here in Oregon to, they often want to make port or other fortified wines. And so they'll bring me some of their wine. I distill it for them, and then they back add that into their wine. And I love working with winemakers. I learn from them, and I think they learn from me too. And so I'm describing with great enthusiasm that this brandy that I'm working on, and this winemaker, he's looking at me, and his eyes are getting bigger and bigger, and he's like, "You're putting brandy in charred American oak?" And he says, "We're not barbarians." Oh, no way! And I'm like, I love that. I immediately went out and looked to see if I could use that name, Barbarian Brandy.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
That's awesome.
Been used already.
Oh, darn it.
Yeah. But yeah, I love it. So I later gave him a bottle of Barbarian Brandy.
That's awesome.
He confessed he enjoyed it.
I bet he did.
So that was the first one. It is high proof. It's 102 proof, 100% Northwest apples, aged in charred American oak.
Nice.
And so because that's a bourbon barrel, charred oak, that's most of the taste. You know, around 3/4 of what you taste in a whiskey is the barrel.
Right.
And
so,
if I'm not mistaken, American oak is quite a bit stronger than French or Hungarian oak.
it's stronger in many ways. There are certain classes of tannins that are stronger in the French oaks, but as far as vanillins and the things we associate with the aroma of whiskey, definitely. Definitely. And so that's another thing of there's normal American white oak, which is what this is. Then there's this special beast called Oregon white oak. And there is actually one cooper in Oregon that makes barrels from Oregon white oak. And it's a little bit in between. It's not quite as strong as the oak that comes from the Ozarks and the Midwest in the United States, but it is still stronger than French oak or Hungarian. So I actually have a barrel of that at home that I'm deconstructing to make experiments with.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Doing a little stave
Yes.
aging. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And we're actually, well, we have a couple of projects in that vein that will come about later.
Awesome.
So then the other brandy, in a rare mellow mood, I decided, well, maybe I ought to do things like regular people once in a while. And
It's overrated.
I know. Yeah. It's like I have a hard time thinking in the box. I'm very comfortable out of the box. In the box, it's harder.
That's right.
So this is a little more in the box, but not completely because it's still American oak. So the 90+% of the world's brandy goes into toasted French oak. And the difference between toasted and charred is really simple. You think of toasted, think of a perfectly cooked marshmallow over the fire when you're making s'mores. Lightly browned on the inside, a little bit caramelized, right? That's what you're doing to the wood. Charred oak looks like the campfire the next morning. It's black. It's crinkly wood that's charred. It's lit on fire, let burn for 2 minutes, and then put out with a water jet, which causes all this steam to happen, and it pops apart the wood, and that makes all these crevices and pores that A, clean up the whiskey, and B, also give it this characteristic flavor.
Right.
Yeah.
So the classic style brandy, which is not totally classic because it's still American, but that's toasted oak. And the bourbon style is the charred oak. And so that's really the biggest difference. The other is that the proof is different. Again, the classic is the normal 80 proof, and the bourbon style is 102. And that really just is its personality. I tried proofing it down to 80, and it was pissed at me. It just, it really dulled it. It was not happy. So, and that makes a little bit of sense because if you look at a lot of bourbons, you'll see a lot of bourbons in the 90 to 100 proof range.
Yeah.
And there's something about that taste profile. There's still magic we don't understand totally.
Oh, yeah.
That why that seems to fit better at that proof, but a lot of bourbons are more than the minimum 80.
And you're going into the barrel at 120, what is it, 126 proof?
No, you have to, for bourbon, you have to be 125 or less.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And so We tend to go in even a little lower than that, and that's because we use smaller barrels. We use 30s. Most of the big wigs use 60s,
Right.
And 30s. The good news is the whiskey matures 2 to 3 times faster.
Okay.
The bad news is that barrel costs about the same as the big one.
Oh.
Right.
And so, again, it trickles down into the cost per bottle, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So we're excited. We can get whiskey to mature in 1 to 2 years. But we're never going to match, Beam for price. That's for sure.
Well, this is a lot better than Beam.
Right.
Yeah, you'll beat their pants off in quality, that's
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. I had no idea that you guys were doing so much barrel aging here.
Right.
We do. We age all of our brandy here.
Amazing.
And we also use it as the base spirit for both our apple liqueur and our pomegranate liqueur.
Okay.
Have you ever not donated, but sold after use your barrels to any of the local, I don't know, other, not distilleries necessarily, but breweries, that sort of thing?
I have not yet. I had one inquiry just a couple weeks ago, and he really only wanted them if they were whiskey barrels, and none of my whiskey barrels are old enough to sell off yet.
Right.
So I haven't. I had a couple brandy barrels I'd be willing to part with, but he, just was unsure if that was going to work.
Sure,
There's
yeah.
kind of a tried
Yeah,
and
you
true
don't really
path
wanna
that you
gamble,
you
yeah.
with the whiskey barrels. So, it'll be a while before I do that. I do tend to use them several times before. Basically with the 30s, that first fill tends to get oak very quickly. You basically need to pull it out of that barrel in 8 to 12 months. And if you want to age longer, that's fine, but you move it from there into an old barrel that's not going to add more oak. It's just going to allow it to mellow. The other thing that the barrel does is oak is very unique amongst woods in general in that it has these pores through it. So you do get a little bit of percolation of oxygen through the wood. And that is why spirits slowly change over time when they sit in wood. There are other things going on as far as, extracting out of the wood, but once you've moved it into an old barrel, that's what's still going on. And, so that, means that I have kind of this second purpose for old barrels.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm not going to be a very good source of old barrels. I tend to hold on to them.
Our home brewers that are listening to the show, I'm sorry, I was trying to do you a solid, but you're going to have to wait a little bit longer if you want one of these amazing brandy barrels. Well, all this talk about your apple brandies really make me want to taste, and you've been kind enough to lay out the 2 apple brandies for us here. And we're going a little off the cuff. I haven't had a chance to really sip on it and take my tasting notes, so we're just going to kind of roll off the nose and off the mouth, right? So where are you going to start us on this, Chris?
Well, wanted to bring up one other aspect that we somehow missed in the first pass. And that is, you'll hear a lot when you're talking about whiskeys now, a very common thing is called finishing a whiskey. And also a brandy, also a rum. And all that means is that you're taking it out of the barrel that it was originally matured in and putting it in something else that sort of complements that original flavor profile to sort of round it out or give it something maybe it was missing, etc. And one of the few single malt whiskeys that I really enjoy, called the Macallan, started doing this many, many decades ago. And for a long time, they were kind of the one that finished all their Scotch whiskey in sherry casks and Oloroso casks and things like that. And now it's just a super hot trend. Everybody's doing it. And so I guess I'm not totally immune from such influences. And so our classic brandy actually spent a year in a toasted oak barrel, and then it spent 6 months finishing in a used Pinot Noir barrel from here in Oregon.
An Oregon Pinot, yeah.
Yeah, and that gives it that little bit more round feel to it. The wine adds a little more fruitiness. There's no wine left in the barrel, but there's some still in the wood.
Right.
And so adds a little color, adds a little fruit, And it actually softens it a little bit. And so that's one thing you'll notice that's different between the classic and the bourbon style. The classic is a little softer, a little rounder, and the bourbon style is really flavorful, pretty intense, kind of hot. And, you know, if that's your thing, you're going to love it. And so it's really interesting that this is essentially the same distillate in the glass.
Yeah.
It's just different aging processes that give it all of the differences in the flavor, the nose. You know, you notice the bourbon style, lots of vanilla in the nose, lots of oak. The classic style is a little more subtle. And so you'll see those as you kind of go back and forth between them, both nosing and sipping. Different nose, different mid palate, different finish. They're kind of different all the way across, and it is because again the barrel is the dominant influence, which by the way sort of belittles what I do. The cooper, the man who builds the barrel, is every bit as important to the process. My job is to not screw it up.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, you have not screwed this up, that's for sure.
The cooper we like the most is a little company, family-owned company up in Minnesota called Black Swan. I've tried barrels from a number of different coopers and put the same spirit in them, and you do not get the same thing out.
Wow.
And Black Swan I just hope they keep doing what they're doing because it makes beautiful spirit.
Well, off the cuff shout out to Black Swan.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. Hey, you guys, put it up. All right, so first up is the apple brandy.
The classic.
The classic apple brandy, excuse me.
And you're right, it is very soft and rounded and very just pleasant.
Yep. Very subtle.
Yeah.
You know, it's not edgy. It's not meant to be edgy or hot. You know, it's more, it's a nice sipping brandy. And, you know, it's found its fans in that vein.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And as I sniff it, it's got, there's definitely some heat. There's some alcohol that's coming through my nostrils, but it's not overpowering. It's very aromatic.
One of the things I notice is that even though this is 100% apples, compared to something like our apple liqueur, it's not overpoweringly appley.
No,
You know,
not at all.
There's nice, delicate notes of the fruit in there, but it's not heavy-handed.
No.
Again, the barrel is a pretty strong influence, even in this. Now, you know, we were talking about French oak earlier. If you drop down to doing that, you're going to get even more subtle influence from the wood, and the fruit will shine through.
Oh, okay.
More.
Yeah.
So this is probably still tipped a little more toward the oaky side. And, you know, I think regionally, people dig that. So it's part of what makes it work.
It's not, I'm picking up what you're saying with the oaky, but it's not too, you know how oak can somehow, it's almost like a mushroom butter. You'll get almost kind of this quality. It's a very
like
earthy quality.
Yeah.
And a buttery almost mouthfeel at the same time. And, I'm not getting any of that. It's just this light charred oak flavor with all of the vanillins that you're talking about. And a little bit of that roasty toastiness is coming through.
Yeah. And if somebody handed me this glass and said, here, try this brandy, I would take a sip and be like, wow, that's really good brandy. And I would not say, oh, that's made from apples. Like, not at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And part of that, you know, the wine influence at the end there is sort of tricking us all a little bit. In that, you know, it's sort of rounding out the fruit with some of those, you know, Pinot flavors. And so it almost seems like a normal
Like
grape-based brandy.
Normal brandy, yeah.
I almost got normal there.
Almost.
That's rare for me, by the way.
Hey, it's working. Am I wrong? But is this just a little bit more clean and crisp than a regular brandy?
I'd say.
It seems like it's staying on my palate, but it's not hanging on.
Right.
Like it seems like it's a very clean, easy sipping brandy.
So that might be because there are different, sort of schools of thought about when you do the distilling. We talked earlier about, having to cut out some of the early part of the distillate because it has a lot of really icky stuff in it. And so one of the core parts of the job as a distiller is called making the cuts. And you have to decide at the front end, okay, which of this stuff is going to become parts cleaner, and at the back end, which is going to just be rejected or recycled and not part of the finished spirit, at least not in this batch. We do recycle into future runs sometimes.
Oh, okay.
And so I remember one time I had, made some brandy and I had it with me and I was at a conference. I've taken some classes from a master, brandy maker. He grew up in Cognac. He now lives in California.
Oh, interesting.
His name is Hubert Germain Robin. He's one of the best distillers in the world. I've been very honored to take classes with him. He's amazing. We're very different. He is pure artist and I'm, sort of halfway between artist and scientist, or try to be. But he's all about, we joke, he's all about, unicorn tears and rainbows as far as why things happen. And I'm like, no, show me a chromatogram.
Right.
I want the science.
Yeah.
And sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. But the fact of the matter is the guy makes some of the best brandy in the world. So
wow.
you cannot knock his methods. And so at one point I took some of my brandy when I knew I was going to be seeing him, and he tasted it and we talked about it, whatever, and he gave it to one of his friends who he grew up in France but speaks perfect English. This other guy was from France, was a rep for one of their stills, didn't speak any English. I speak some French, but not colloquial French. And he tasted it and he handed it back to Hubert and he said, "You cut the nose off it." And
oh no!
And I'm like, "Oh, thanks, bro."
Oh no!
And it's just a reflection of they believe you should keep way more of that early stuff.
Oh,
and okay, so this is just American bias talking, and I'll own it. But the truth of the matter is, most of us don't like that stuff.
Right.
It tastes like solvents.
Yeah.
And so. Of course, it hurt my feelings because this is a guy who's a professional in the field, and he is from France. And but I also kind of went, no, not doing it that way.
Yeah,
no.
That's not
good for you.
That's not what I want to make.
Way to stand up for yourself.
You've got regions of the globe that like the flavor of 5-year-old horned goat, and like the flavor of
and mezcal
and
yeah,
and hams.
Right.
A rack of hams. Right. So, regionally, everybody has their own weird tastes, and that's just one of them. And I'm glad you're leaving it out of this one because it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
Nobody's walking around going, "I do believe that I'm in the mood for a Busch Light."
Yeah.
Nope. We want something good, and that's
relatively few of those here, thankfully.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
And so, second up is your bourbon style.
The bourbon style. Yep. So. This is the Barbarian brandy, and I fully embrace that name. It's definitely, I call it whiskey and brandy clothing, or brandy and whiskey clothing, something like that.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's definitely got a whiskey-like profile, but then there's just enough fruit there that you say, oh, there's something interesting there. That's what makes it fun for me, both from a like making the Chevalier or sipping it. It's got enough of its own personality that it's next of kin, but it's not exactly the same.
Chris, this is amazing. Oh, I mean, it's a higher proof for sure, but it's sweeter, it's richer. It's a completely different animal. Like putting these two side by side, I can't hardly believe they're the same product finished a different way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible the difference.
Well, you sound like you're like me. I have a little bit of a preference. I'm not supposed to have favorites, you know. It's like having favorite children. But
You always have a favorite child.
yeah. But the bourbon brandy is kind of a signature thing for me. I love the way it turned out, and enough other people also do that we'll keep making it. So,
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
and it is very rich. That's what's fun about it. Is
It's decadent.
and that's the thing where,
Yeah.
you know, like I said, when I tried proofing it down to 80, it hurt it. It did.
Yeah.
I believe it.
It did not taste as good. And so we just said, well, that's its personality. So
Yeah.
it wants to be big and bold. So let it rip.
Oh, this is big, bold, and juicy, and there's so much caramel and
Yeah.
brown sugar. And you want to talk about drinking an apple pie? Like I am sitting here drinking a
Yeah.
boozy apple pie. This is incredible.
I just flashed back to my Aunt Pauline's applesauce that she would make and then can, well, like in jars, but you call it canning.
Jarring.
And jarring. No, my Aunt Pauline, we called her Auntie Pine because Aunt Pauline was hard to say, I guess. But she was the keeper of the applesauce and the juicy fruit.
Oh,
Yeah. And I just flashed right back to her kitchen with a bowl of applesauce.
Put this in your applesauce. It'll make a treat.
Oh man,
That's what I'm talking
My
about.
Aunt Pauline would have put this in her applesauce. Yes.
this is going to sound sacrilegious. I apologize, but this is going to go in a barbecue sauce.
You know what? I'm all about and. There's a lot of ways to enjoy it.
All right,
And,
good.
Nice.
You know, similarly, the liqueurs, we really have been trying to encourage people to experiment and do culinary things with it. People
Yeah.
have done some amazing things. The apple products, you know, really lend themselves to pork and ham and things like that. People have made glazes with both the liqueur and the brandy. A couple people have done interesting Christmassy desserts, you know, with things. We were giving a gift of the ginger liqueur to somebody one time and stopped in right as they were pulling a peach cobbler out of the oven. And we took the ginger and we just drizzled it over the top of the peach cobbler.
My goodness.
It was to die for. And, you know, ginger and pear, just, there's all these different combinations with fruit in particular that
Yeah.
are amazing. But then there's the whole, you know, meat salads, you know, all sorts of things. One person made a pomegranate vinaigrette salad dressing
yes.
with the liqueur, and that was super
Yes.
good. So, you know,
Yeah.
who knows? Yeah.
All
Go,
right,
go
perfect.
wild on the
Okay.
grill.
You're not going to begrudge me. I appreciate that.
Nope.
Challenge
not at all.
accepted.
Well, so speaking of doing fun things with these, we're going to have all kinds of interesting content this coming week that are going to involve Spiritopia. So obviously Thirsty Thursday has passed, and you guys are seeing all kinds of other content by the time you hear this that is involving Spiritopia. And we hope that you're enjoying it because we've sure enjoyed it. And make sure to hit us up with your comments and your questions and suggestions, things that you would do with your Spiritopia liqueur. Don't forget to run out and get your Spiritopia liqueur
Run.
anywhere the
Run.
best liquors are sold. I have no doubt that you can find it just about everywhere you are. Is there anywhere that our listeners are not going to be able to find this? The answer is no. So they can just go ahead and run to the nearest liquor store. If they don't have Spiritopia, tell them, what the heck is the matter with
Right.
you? Get Spiritopia in here right now, ASAP. Because
Every store can get it if they don't already have it.
All
that's right. BoostBoozeandBarbecue.com, recommended product. Chris, thank you so much for letting us be here. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming by. It's been fun.
Oh, it's been loads of fun, and we can't wait to do it again. And just make sure, listeners, that you are going by Spiritopia.com and checking out what they have. Make sure to pick up their stuff. Hit them up on Facebook and Instagram at Spiritopia. If you'd like, when you're making something with your Spiritopia, if you're just drinking it straight, go ahead and tag Spiritopia and go ahead and tag us the same way at Boost Booze and BBQ on Twitter, Instagram. The Facebook, of course, is facebook.com/boostboozebbq. The website's where you're going to find all of our past and present episodes and all of our medias. We have links underneath of each individual show. that you can just hit the button, take you straight there. We're going to have a button that takes you straight to Spiritopia.com. So thanks so much for listening. This is Andy for Chris and for Jojo. Have a great one. We will see you next time.
Boost, Booze and Barbecue.